Hello, 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 everybody. Um, Hope you're all safe. Hope you're all well. Hope everything's all right. I am again hiding in my bedroom because this homeschooling for my two little children is getting a little chaotic and I need some peace and quiet. Anyway, just going to go through the slides today. I don't have anything new or additional to say about anything. You're signing the day log. You are absolutely um, private messaging me after you finish a quiz or work late so I know that you've done it and I can grade it. Other than that, that's really all I got. So let's go right to the slides. So I put the slides up about 10 minutes ago. You are looking at slide one, which is telling you the title of today, which is What Role Do Old Growth Forests and Tree Plantations Have? So we're talking about old growth forests and we're talking about tree plantations today. Now, we've been talking about agriculture and growing food and all that other fun stuff, but we're still in agriculture, land use, right? So the unit itself is land and water use. So we've been focusing on agriculture as far as growing food, right? So now we're switching. We're still talking about how we use the land, but we're not necessarily talking about it how we use it for food. We're talking about how we use it for timber, for wood. You know, we harvest wood all the time. We need it for all our construction and building purposes and many other things. So it is an important part of the agricultural system, and we're going to talk about that a little today. So, slide two is the agenda as usual. Check it out at your leisure. Slide three is a review from the IPM, the Integrated Pest Management that we did a few days ago. That was already on your quiz, but if you're a little shady on it, you can look through this review. It will come back when it's time to test. So make sure you understand it. Check out that review. Slide four is just a little more review on the integrated pest management. And then slide five is our objective slide. So go to slide five. We are looking at, by the time we are done with this, we should be able to explain the significance and inherent value of old growth forests. And we should be able to explain the role of tree plantations in forestry. So again, old growth forests and tree plantations is what we're focusing on. There are two video links on this objective slide on slide five. Definitely, definitely, definitely watch them. They are only a couple minutes long each. The first one is old growth forests, and it really explains well what an old growth forest is. I'm going to explain what an old growth forest is, but it really it really irons it out. So you could watch that too, just for a little more info. And then the world's tallest tree link is really cool. There are some massive trees, right? Think more along the Pacific Northwest of our country and the northern coast, the northern section of California. You have the redwood forest and you have giant sequoias. You have these massive, massive trees. So that video sort of talks about that, and it's really, really cool. Okay, moving on to slide six. Slide six is showing you one of these massive, massive trees. It is called the President. I guess it was named the President. It is a tree that's so big that it took 126 frames to take a picture of it. 126 pictures to capture it in in a close enough view. It's 250 foot high, 250 feet high, and it has been around for 3,000 years. That is an old, big tree, very resilient, obviously. These slides, the next few slides says, can you find the climbers? So you can see the guy in the orange jacket all the way down at the base of the tree. See how small he looks compared to that tree. And then in slide seven, it shows you a different section of that tree. And I'll let you zoom in and try and find a climber in that frame. And then it shows you a different section in slide eight of that tree. I'll let you zoom in and try and find a climber in that. And then slide nine finally shows you the top of the tree. And you can see the guy in the orange jacket sort of in the middle there. So that is just a big, massive tree. It's just um, for purposes of knowing that trees grow for a very long time in certain areas and they get very, very large, right? There are, I know people may have seen it. I know I've never been out to one of these large places in the western part of the United States. I really plan to because I really think it would be amazing. Some of these trees are so big and round. I know a famous tree, I think, I don't know, in the 50s or 60s before they were environmentally friendly, I guess. They actually cut a hole in one of the tree trunks and there's a road that goes through it. And you can actually drive your car when you're in, I think it's in the redwood forest. You could actually drive your car through the trunk of a tree because it's this bridge that they cut in the trunk of the tree. Amazing how big these trees are. Um, and that goes to show how resilient they are. All right, slide 10 shows you the entire tree. It shows you where people were in those frames. So if you wanted to go back and look and see where they were, that first one was easy on the ground, but that second one was a little tough to see. Again, 250-foot, 3,000-year-old. That's amazing. So slide 11. Slide 11 shows a timeline. This defines an old growth forest. So you can see the timeline there, and you can see that between 0 and 15 years, uh, you see small grasses and you see little shrubs, right? That is what you can see when you look at a forest floor over the first 15 years of its first growth or secondary growth. And then from 15 years to 30 years, you see saplings and bushes and shrubs. So saplings are just small trees. They're young trees that have a very, very small diameter. So they call them saplings. Then when you get to year 60-ish, you have a young forest. You have these trees that are large, trees that you would see when you look, if you ever go hiking or if you ever go to some place like, even Branch Brook has mature or young trees and mature trees, right? Um, and then you see it around 100 years, it becomes a mature forest, which means it's just older. It's been there for a longer time. There's a lot of older things in it as well as young things. And then once you get to year 200 years and beyond is what they consider an old growth forest. Okay. So the thing about an old growth forest is if you have this 500 years pass and you say, okay, I'm in an old growth forest now. It's been here for 500 years. It doesn't mean that everything you see is 500 years old. Okay. It means that there are things in this forest that are 500 years older, 3,000 years older, whatever. Um, but it doesn't mean that everything there is old because what's happening, right? If you look at the floor of the forest, it's always changing. Animals are eating it. Sometimes there are fires. Sometimes people cutting things down, right? The shrubs in the winter, things are dying and then regrowing in the spring, right? So you have all of this stuff happening on the floor of the forest. So you do constantly have new grass growing and you have new bushes growing seasonally and you have new trees growing, smaller saplings, as you can see in the picture behind that big tree. So an old growth forest has just been there a long time. All right. And it does have things that are very, very old, trees that are very, very old, but it is also an active thing. It's also got new things happening in it all the time. So that's the difference between something that's young and something that's old. Something that's young doesn't have any of these 500, 2,000-year-old trees in it. All right. It hasn't gotten there yet. Once it gets there, it's still recycled. You still have these super old things there, but you do have new stuff happening as well. So that's sort of important to remember. And that's what one of those videos in the objectives sort of talks about a little bit. So definitely check it out. Slide 12 is a you do slide. You are going to link a picture of an old growth ecosystem in the speaker notes. So I want to see, search around a little bit for an image that strikes you as an old growth ecosystem and link it here. You can link more than one if you'd like. Slide 13 is also a you do slide. Slide 13 is you're going to find an old growth forest map. So you can look maybe Google worldwide where old growth forests are, or you can focus on one area. Throughout this slideshow, you will get a couple of hints of where you can find old growth forests. For instance, I've already given you when I talked about the redwoods and stuff like that in California. So get a map that shows you an area, whether it's worldwide or whether it's country or whether it's whatever, however you want to show it. Let's show it that way, but it should be a map. Okay. It shouldn't be a picture or a photo or a diagram. It should be a map. All right. Slide 14. So you have old growth forests. You have forests that have been here for 200, 500, 700, 3,000 years, whatever the case may be, right? Eventually things can happen to it, right? Cut down. It can be cut down. There can be a fire that destroys a section of it or whatever the case may be, right? Old growth forests are often used for their timber. We need timber right? We need wood for construction, and these old growth forests, the ones that have the big trees, the ones that have the trees that make more economical sense to cut down because you get more wood out of them. All right. It's more mature wood. It's denser. It's stronger. So old growth trees are something that you sort of look to cut down because they're the bigger varieties. All right. What happens when you cut down or it burns or whatever you and a section of this old growth forest is gone? Well, naturally speaking, it will eventually return, but it has to go through all of those stages we saw in that timeline. So it actually has to go, into that 115 years to 60 years to 100 years to 200. So it still needs another 200 years to become naturally that old growth forest, right? And then you have trees randomly dispersed through this old growth forest, and you can do that. But who wants to wait for that, right? As far as usable timber, right? That's not a very good uh, recycling process if we have to wait 400 years to get the next one, right? So that doesn't make much sense for us. And then you see something as far as succession, right? Succession, we talked about that about a month ago. We talked about primary succession and secondary succession. So secondary succession is what this would be, right? If you have an old growth forest and it gets cut down or burnt down or whatever, it will come back, right? It'll go through all those stages we saw, and that's called secondary succession. So that happens, right? But like I said, can't wait 200, 300 years for timber and for wood and for this and that. So what we have done or doing is that we take the desired trees, the trees that produce that good, dense timber that we use for construction and stuff, and we can directly replant or seed them in what they call a tree plantation or a tree farm, right? A tree plantation is just a larger tree farm, and recut them when they're mature enough for timber. So not that you can, well, you can't speed it up. Instead of waiting the 200 years for nature to take its course in the soil and this and that, and this and that, you can take the seeds from these trees, from these desired trees that you want to cut down, and you can take a huge area and this tree plantation, you just have a huge area open where you plant all these seeds, and then this whole area will produce the trees that you want. So you're producing more of those desired trees in a smaller area, where if you let it go naturally, there may be a desired tree here and a desired tree here and a desired tree over there and a desired tree over there. Here you're growing a forest that is dense with the type of trees that you desire. All right, so that's what tree plantations are, and they are huge, huge, huge areas of land. The next slide, slide 15, talks about how they're not good or bad, really. I mean, there's nothing too crazy about it. When you have trees growing, trees are taking out carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. That's a positive thing, right? Some of the other things is what this slide says is that it takes up a lot of space. You need a lot of space to have a tree plantation. You need a lot of area to grow these things, to have a tree farm that are growing these huge usable desired trees, right? So with that comes the fact that you can't really use that space for anything else. So that could be a negative on it, where as far as you can't farm that land, you can't be a farmer and farm that land if you have a tree plantation, because it's not going to be usable for farming. So that could take a economic hit, right? It might be an economic problem. The environment itself. Okay, when you have an old growth forest, a natural old growth forest, you have really, really old trees that are really high, and you have trees that are 100 years old, and you have small saplings, and you have trees and shrubs on the ground and stuff like that, right? You have these different layers. So what happens is the sun can penetrate an old growth forest. You need the sun to reach the ground because all those shrubs and all those berries that the animals eat, right? So in a natural old growth forest, things are at different levels. So the canopy, as they call it, the canopy is that top layer of tree, right? Of branches and leaves and all that stuff. The canopy is at a different level so sun can penetrate. When you take all these desired trees and grow them and plant them on a tree plantation, typically your canopy is at the same level all the time. It may be a little off or a little whatever, but your canopy stays the same. So what does that do? It's like an umbrella. It blocks the sun from reaching the ground. So now the sun can't penetrate the canopy of this tree plantation And not a lot of stuff is growing on the ground, not a lot of shrubs, not a lot of grasses, not a lot of berries. So there's not a lot of food for animals. So they won't inhabit a tree plantation as much as they would a natural old growth forest. So that can be an environmental issue. If you clear all this space for a tree plantation, you're sort of pushing animals away. Not that they can't move into it, but there's not a lot of resources for them. All right. So that could be an issue. Slide 16 talks about the biggest problem with tree plantations. They talk about how, like, these things take up hectares, like, acres and acres and millions and millions and millions and millions of acres. They say in some countries, Chile, South Africa, Brazil, Indonesia, there's millions of acres of these replanted tree farms, right, or plantations. There's a couple big words there. One of them is uniformity, right? In the first hash, in the first tag. The other word that screams out at me is monoculture, which we talked about a month ago, right? And then there's another word in the next bullet point that jumps out at me called biodiversity, right? Problem with this is you're taking all the seeds from these wonderful trees and you're planting them and you're growing them. You're growing a uniform monoculture. We said monocultures are one type of thing. Polycultures are many types, right? So when you have many types of things growing in one area, you have biodiversity. When you only have one type of tree growing in this area, you have a monoculture, you don't have biodiversity. We also know the problem with that. If a pest moves in and says, oh, I like to eat this tree and destroy it, they have millions and millions and millions of acres of these trees they can spread, and they can destroy this entire thing. If there's a disease that kills this type of tree, it's going to move through all of them. Whereas if you had different types of trees and you had different types of vegetation, that biodiversity would be able to withstand pests and disease, right? So being that they are uniform monocultures, these tree plantations, you have a lot of problems with pests and diseases because it gets very dangerous. If you can't eradicate that pest or that disease, it potentially kills everything you've been trying to do. So that's not a good thing. All right. Also, as I said, the canopy is pretty solid on these tree plantations, so sun doesn't penetrate. If sun doesn't penetrate, like I said, vegetation won't grow and the things on the floor of the forest won't grow. Those are the things that grow and die in the winter and grow and die in the winter. And what that does is all that dead material helps to helps to the soil become nutrient rich again, right? It's in the nutrient cycle there. So if you have things, leaves, when leaves grow, leaves fall, leaves die, all of that gets broken down and it becomes nutrients for the soil. If you don't have sun penetrating the canopy and you don't have a lot of growth on the floor, you don't have a lot of things dying and recycling, you don't have a lot of nutrients going into the soil. So that soil can become nutrient starved, and that's not even good for the trees that are growing on it. So there's a lot of different things that happen with tree plantations. They're not a bad thing because we're trying to grow and recycle, but there are a couple hiccups that you have to deal with when you're doing things like that. And then slide 17 is what you are doing, right? Doing part of your assignment. So you have two videos at the very beginning that you're supposed to watch. Along the way, you have two slides that you have to link pictures and a map. So that is stuff you have to do. And then here on slide 17, you are watching this video. It's watch the first 16 minutes of this video called Survivors of the Firestorm. It's a pretty cool video. Feel free to watch more of it if you'd like. But in order to answer the question I need you to answer, you need to watch from 0 to 16 minutes. Okay. Once you're done with that, the link is in the speaker notes to that video. Slide 18 is the question that I want you to answer. So slide 18 talks about something called Black Saturday, and you don't know what that is because you haven't watched the video yet. So I want you to read that question. I want you to answer it right in the speaker notes. I want you to give me a good, solid answer. I want you to give me a couple of sentences. I don't want you to just give me a 1 word or a 2 word. All right. So what that means is everything that you're supposed to do today, you can do right on this slideshow. You can answer this in the speaker notes. You can link your map and your picture in the speaker notes, and you can turn this in if you'd like to. And that would be the best way to get that done. All right, peeps. I'm glad that most of you are going on, even if you're not coming on live as much as I'd like, that's okay. I'm glad that most of you are checking in throughout the day and watching these videos, going through the slides, because I am getting some views on these videos by the end of the day. So I do appreciate that. Keep doing what you're doing. We have this lecture, and we have 2 more, I believe, before another quiz. So that other quiz would either be super late next week or early the following week. All right. What day is today? Today's like, oh, it's almost May. So in a couple of weeks, we'll be getting word on what's going on. I know that many states have shut down for the year as far as school goes. We have not yet, so I don't know what's going on. Hopefully, I get to see you guys a couple more times before you move on into your adulthood. If not, we have to have some sort of senior get-together picnic thing when this is all over. But be safe, and if you have any problems, just private message me. I am here until 3:30 every day to answer anything you need, and I usually stop on a couple times at night. I'm going to be getting your grades in this afternoon if I don't have a meeting, and I will talk to you soon.